The sound of footsteps echoed through the massive warehouse-sized facility as 17-year-old Alex walked through the doors of Phoenix Aerospace. The smell of metal and machinery filled his nose, just like it had every day after school for the past 2 years. But today, something felt different in the air. His father, Roberto, was already deep into his work, checking the giant pipes and connections that fed fuel to the rocket engines. Roberto had been working as a maintenance technician at Phoenix Aerospace for 8 years now. It wasn't the job he had dreamed of when he first came to America, but it paid the bills and kept food on the table for his family. Alex threw his backpack into the corner of his father's small work area and pulled out his homework. Math problems filled the pages, but his eyes kept drifting to the massive rocket engine that dominated the center of the facility. The thing was huge, probably 3 times taller than Alex himself, with pipes and wires running everywhere like the veins of some mechanical giant. The engineers were gathered around it again today, just like they had been for the past 3 weeks. Alex could hear the frustration in their voices, even from across the room. Dr. Patricia Holmes, the head engineer, was pointing at her tablet while 2 other engineers shook their heads. Their expensive suits looked out of place next to the dirty, industrial setting of the testing floor. "Dad, what's wrong with the big engine?" Alex asked as Roberto came over during his break, wiping his hands on an old rag. Roberto glanced toward the group of engineers and lowered his voice. "They can't get it to work right, Neo. Every time they test it, something goes wrong. The pressure jumps around like a wild horse. They've been trying to fix it for weeks now." Alex had been watching these tests from his corner for months. At first, it was just curiosity. The rocket engine was impressive, sure, but what really caught his attention was the pattern. Every time they ran a test, the same problems happened. The engineers would look at their computers, make adjustments, and try again. But Alex noticed things the computers couldn't see. The way the whole engine vibrated slightly when it started up. How certain pipes seemed to shake more than others. The sound the fuel pumps made when they were working hard. Alex had grown up around machinery thanks to his father's work, and he had learned to listen to what machines were trying to tell him. Meanwhile, across the facility, CEO Victoria Blackwood was having the worst month of her career. Phoenix Aerospace had bet everything on this new rocket engine design. The Mars colonization project was supposed to launch in 6 weeks, and every day of delay was costing them millions of dollars. Worse than that, their biggest competitor, Stellar Industries, was breathing down their necks with their own Mars mission. Victoria had built Phoenix Aerospace from nothing over the past 15 years. She started with just 3 employees in a garage, and now they had over 500 people working for them. She was known in the industry for being tough but fair, someone who could make hard decisions when needed. But this engine problem was testing even her legendary patience. The investors were calling every day now. The media was starting to ask questions about delays, and her own board of directors was beginning to whisper about bringing in outside help, or even worse, selling the company to someone who could actually deliver results. "Dr. Holmes, I need straight answers," Victoria said as she approached the group of engineers. Her voice was calm, but everyone who worked for her knew that tone meant business. "How much longer until this engine works the way it's supposed to?" "Doctor." Holmes looked uncomfortable. She had 3 degrees from top universities and 20 years of experience designing rocket engines. But this problem was unlike anything she had encountered before. "We're running more simulations tonight. The computer models show everything should be working perfectly, but the real-world tests keep giving us these pressure fluctuations." "I don't want to hear about simulations," Victoria replied. "I want to hear about solutions. We have investors flying in next week to see a successful test. If we can't deliver that, we're all going to be looking for new jobs." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Alex could feel it from across the facility, even though he couldn't hear exactly what was being said. His father had taught him that when people were stressed about work, it usually meant someone's job was on the line. Alex closed his math book and walked closer to the engine. Staying in the shadows where the adults wouldn't notice him, he had been studying this machine for months now, not from textbooks or fancy computer programs, but by watching and listening. His father had always told him that machines have their own language, and if you pay attention, they'll tell you what's wrong. Engine was beautiful in its own way. Thousands of parts all working together to create enough power to push a spacecraft all the way to Mars. But Alex could see the problems that the engineers were missing. It wasn't that the design was wrong, it was that the real world was different. From their computer screens, Roberto noticed his son staring at the engine and walked over. "You've been watching that thing for months now, Alex. What do you see that all those smart engineers are missing?" Alex pointed to a series of mounting brackets near the base of the engine. "Those brackets there, Dad. Watch them during the next test. They vibrate differently than the computer models say they should. And see how that fuel line connects to the main chamber? It's not lined up exactly right. Just a tiny bit off, but enough to mess up the fuel flow." Roberto looked where his son was pointing. He had worked around machinery his whole life, first in Mexico at his uncle's auto repair shop, then here at Phoenix Aerospace. His son had inherited that same mechanical intuition. But Alex had something Roberto never had at that age: access to all the technical information he wanted through the internet, while other kids his age were playing video games or watching movies. Alex spent his free time watching engineering lectures online, reading technical manuals, and studying how things worked. He had taught himself calculus just so he could understand the physics behind rocket propulsion. Not because he had to for school, but because he was genuinely curious about how things worked. "You really think you know what's wrong with it?" Roberto asked, half proud and half worried about where this conversation might lead. "I think so, Dad. But nobody's going to listen to a 17-year-old kid whose father fixes pipes for a living." Roberto looked at his son with a mixture of pride and concern. Alex was smart, there was no doubt about that. But the corporate world wasn't always kind to people like them. Still, Roberto had seen enough in his life to know that sometimes the best solutions came from the most unexpected places. The test alarm sounded across the facility, meaning another engine test was about to begin. Alex and Roberto moved to a safe distance and watched as the massive engine roared to life. The sound was incredible, like controlled thunder that you could feel in your chest. But Alex wasn't listening to the main roar. He was listening to the smaller sounds underneath, the vibrations and pressure changes that told the real story of what was happening inside the machine. Sure enough, just like every other test over the past 3 weeks, the pressure reading started jumping around after about 30 seconds. The engineers scrambled to their computers, trying to figure out what was going wrong. But Alex could see the problem with his own eyes, if only someone would give him the chance to explain. The failed test had left everyone in the facility on edge. Victoria Blackwood stood near the control room windows, watching her team of engineers huddle around their computers like they had done countless times before. Her patience was wearing thin, and the weight of the company's future pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. Dr. Patricia Holmes approached Victoria with yet another report filled with technical jargon and complicated charts. "We've run the diagnostics 3 more times," she said, her voice showing the strain of weeks without a breakthrough. "The computer simulations keep telling us everything should work perfectly, but the real engine just won't cooperate." Victoria took the report but didn't bother looking at it. She had seen dozens of similar reports over the past month, all saying the same thing in different ways. They were stuck. "Patricia, I don't need more reports. I need solutions. The investors are arriving Monday morning, and they expect to see this engine working flawlessly." The other engineers gathered around, their faces showing a mixture of frustration and fear. These were some of the smartest people in the aerospace industry. They had degrees from the best universities, years of experience, and access to the most advanced computer modeling systems money could buy. But none of that seemed to matter when, faced with this particular problem, Dr. James Wright, the senior propulsion engineer, stepped forward. He was a man in his 50s who had worked on some of the most famous rocket projects in history. His reputation in the industry was solid, and his confidence had never been shaken before this project. "Victoria, I think we need to consider bringing in outside consultants. Maybe someone from NASA or SpaceX could take a fresh look at this." Victoria's jaw tightened. Bringing in outside help would be admitting defeat, and it would also mean sharing their proprietary technology with potential competitors. Phoenix Aerospace had spent millions developing this engine design, and she wasn't about to hand over their secrets to outsiders. "Absolutely not," she said firmly. "This is our project, our technology, and our responsibility. We figure this out ourselves, or we don't figure it out at all." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what Victoria wasn't saying out loud. If they couldn't solve this problem soon, Phoenix Aerospace might not survive. The Mars colonization contract was worth billions of dollars, and losing it would probably mean the end of the company. Meanwhile, across the facility, Alex was sitting in his father's work area, supposedly doing homework, but actually listening to every word of the heated discussion near the engine. His Spanish textbook lay open in front of him, but his mind was focused on the technical problem that had stumped the entire engineering team. Roberto noticed his son's distraction. "You're not fooling anyone, Mio. I can see you're not really studying those Spanish verbs." Alex looked up at his father with a sheepish grin. "Dad, I keep thinking about what's wrong with that engine. I know I'm just a kid, but I really think I understand what the problem is." Roberto sat down next to his son. Over the years, he had learned to take Alex's mechanical insights seriously. The boy had an unusual gift for understanding how machines worked, something that couldn't be taught in any classroom. "Tell me what you're thinking." Alex pointed toward the massive engine. "See, all those engineers are looking at their computer screens, trying to find the problem in their data. But the problem isn't in the data, it's in the physical world. The engine is trying to tell them what's wrong, but they're not listening to it." "What do you mean?" Roberto asked, genuinely curious about his son's perspective. "It's like when you're working on a car. Dad, sometimes the car makes a weird noise that tells you exactly what's broken, but you have to know how to listen. That engine is making noises and vibrations that show exactly what's wrong, but everyone is too busy looking at their computers to notice." Roberto nodded slowly. He understood what Alex meant. In his years of working on machinery, he had learned that sometimes the most sophisticated diagnostic equipment couldn't replace good old-fashioned observation and experience. Back near the engine, Victoria's frustration was reaching a boiling point. She had built her company by taking calculated risks and making tough decisions, but this situation was testing her like nothing before. The investors who were flying in next week weren't just providing money, they were providing the funding that would keep Phoenix Aerospace alive. "I want everyone to stay late tonight," she announced to the engineering team. "We're going to run continuous tests until we find the answer. I don't care if we have to work all weekend." Dr. Holmes looked exhausted already. "Victoria, we've been working 12-hour days for 3 weeks. Maybe we need to step back and approach this differently." "There is no different approach," Victoria snapped. "We solve this problem, or we all start looking for new jobs on Monday." The tension in the room was now so thick that even the maintenance staff could feel it. Roberto watched the scene unfold and felt sorry for the engineers. He knew what it was like to be under pressure at work, but he had never seen anything quite like this. That's when Victoria noticed Alex sitting in the corner. The young man had been a fixture in the facility for months, always quiet, always studying, never causing any trouble. But today, something about his presence irritated her. Maybe it was the stress, or maybe it was the fact that her $1,000,000 team of experts was being outsmarted by a machine. But seeing the maintenance worker's son sitting there calmly doing homework while her world was falling apart struck her as almost insulting. "Excuse me," Victoria called out, walking toward Alex and Roberto. "Who is that young man, and why is he here during such a critical time?" Roberto stood up quickly, recognizing the authority in Victoria's voice. "I'm sorry, Miss Blackwood. This is my son Alex. He comes here after school to do his homework while waiting for me to finish work. He's never caused any problems." Victoria looked at Alex, who was now staring back at her with calm, intelligent eyes. There was something about the teenager that struck her as unusual. Most kids his age would be intimidated by being questioned by a CEO, but Alex seemed completely at ease. "And what exactly does he do here while you're working?" Victoria asked, her tone sharp with stress and frustration. "He just studies, ma'am. Sometimes he helps me with small maintenance tasks, but mostly he just does his schoolwork." Victoria was about to dismiss them and get back to the crisis at hand when something inside her snapped. Maybe it was the weeks of frustration, or maybe it was the absurdity of the situation, but she found herself saying something that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. "You know what?" she said, her voice getting louder so that all the engineers could hear. "My team of highly educated, highly paid experts can't figure out what's wrong with this engine. Maybe we should ask the maintenance worker's son what he thinks." The room went completely silent. Dr. Holmes looked shocked, Dr. Wright's face turned red with embarrassment, and the other engineers exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had all heard the sarcasm in Victoria's voice, but they also heard something else: desperation. Roberto felt his stomach drop. He knew his boss was just venting her frustration, but he also knew that his son was now at the center of a very awkward situation. "Miss Blackwood, I'm sure Alex doesn't want to bother you with—" "No, I'm serious," Victoria interrupted, her voice now carrying the challenge that filled the entire facility. "If my $1,000,000 engineering team can't solve this problem, maybe a high school student can. What do you say, young man? Want to take a shot at fixing our rocket engine?" All eyes in the room turned to Alex. The engineers were watching with a mixture of amusement and annoyance. Roberto was watching with worry and pride, and Victoria was watching with the desperate hope that somehow, someway, something would finally give her the breakthrough she needed. Alex stood up slowly, his heart pounding but his mind clear. He had been studying this problem for weeks, and he was confident he understood what was wrong. But he also understood that this moment would change everything, one way or another. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly but firmly. "I'd like to try." The silence in the facility was deafening. Alex could hear his own heartbeat as he walked toward the massive rocket engine, feeling the weight of every pair of eyes in the room following his movement. His father Roberto stood frozen, unsure whether to be proud or terrified of what was about to happen. Dr. Patricia Holmes crossed her arms and shook her head. She had spent 3 weeks trying to solve this problem using the most advanced computer systems available, and now a teenager was going to take a look at it like he was checking under the hood of a broken car. The whole situation felt like an insult to her years of education and experience. Victoria Blackwood watched from a distance, part of her already regretting the challenge she had just issued. What had seemed like a moment of desperate inspiration now felt like a public relations disaster waiting to happen. If word got out that she had asked a high school student to fix a multi-million-dollar rocket engine while her expert team stood by, the industry would never let her live it down. But there was something about Alex that made Victoria pause. As he approached the engine, he didn't look nervous or overwhelmed like most teenagers would in this situation. Instead, he moved with the quiet confidence of someone who genuinely believed he could help. His eyes were focused, studying every detail. of the massive machine in front of him. Alex stopped about 10 feet away from the engine and just stood there for a moment, taking it all in. He had been watching this machine for months, but being this close to it during a moment of crisis felt completely different. The engine towered over him, a complex maze of pipes, valves, and electronic components that represented years of advanced engineering work. "Well?" Dr. James Wright called out impatiently. "Are you going to fix it by staring at it?" Alex ignored the sarcasm in the engineer's voice and began walking slowly around the engine. He wasn't looking at the computer screens or the diagnostic equipment that surrounded the machine. Instead, he was looking at the physical components themselves, studying how they were connected and how they moved. Roberto watched his son with a mixture of pride and anxiety. He knew Alex had an incredible gift for understanding machinery, but this was different from fixing a car or helping with household repairs. This was a rocket engine worth millions of dollars, surrounded by some of the smartest engineers in the world. The pressure was enormous. As Alex continued his inspection, he began to see exactly what he had suspected all along. The problem wasn't in the engine's design. The engineers had done brilliant work creating the blueprints. The problem was in how those blueprints had been translated into reality. He stopped near the base of the engine, where several large mounting brackets held the fuel delivery system in place. To most people, these brackets would look perfectly normal. They were precisely machined, properly installed, and exactly where the blueprints said they should be. But Alex could see something that the computers couldn't measure. "There," he said, quietly pointing to one of the brackets. Victoria moved closer. "What? What are you looking at?" Alex knelt down next to the bracket and placed his hand on it. "This mounting system is creating vibrations that the computer models don't account for. When the engine fires up, these brackets shake in a specific pattern. It's not much, maybe just a few millimeters, but it's enough to throw off the fuel flow." Dr. Holmes stepped forward, her skepticism obvious. "That's impossible. We've measured every component to within thousandths of an inch. The mounting system is perfect according to our specifications." "Your specifications are perfect on paper," Alex replied, standing up and brushing the dust off his knees. "But this is the real world. Metal expands when it gets hot. Bolts settle over time. Vibrations create tiny movements that add up to big problems." He moved to another part of the engine, pointing to a fuel line that connected to the main combustion chamber. "And this line here, it's installed exactly where the blueprints say it should be, but look at the angle." Alex pulled out his phone and used the flashlight to illuminate the connection point. "See how it's not quite straight? It's maybe 2 degrees off from perfect alignment. That tiny angle is creating turbulence in the fuel flow, which is causing the pressure fluctuations you've been seeing in your tests." The engineers gathered around to look at what Alex was pointing out. Dr. Wright squinted at the connection, trying to see what the teenager was talking about. "Even if there is a slight misalignment, it couldn't possibly cause the kind of problems we're experiencing." "It's not just one problem," Alex explained patiently. "It's a combination of small problems that add up to create big ones. The vibrations from the mounting brackets affect the fuel delivery system. The misaligned fuel line creates turbulence. The turbulence interacts with the pressure waves from the combustion process. All of these tiny issues work together to create the chaos you're seeing in your test results." Victoria found herself genuinely interested in what Alex was saying. His explanation made sense in a way that all the technical reports she had read over the past month had not. "So how do we fix it?" Alex looked around at the tools available in the facility. "We need to make some adjustments to the mounting system to reduce the vibrations. And we need to realign that fuel line to eliminate the turbulence. It's not complicated work, but it requires understanding how all these systems interact with each other." Dr. Holmes was still skeptical. "You're talking about making modifications to a system that took us months to design and install." We can't. Just start changing things based on a teenager's hunch. It's not a hunch, Alex said firmly. I've been watching this engine for months, and I've seen these same patterns in every test. Your computer models are excellent for designing the engine, but they can't account for every variable in the real world. Roberto stepped forward, finally finding his voice. Ms. Blackwood, my son has been studying engineering on his own for years. He's taught himself things that most people only learn in college. Maybe we should listen to what he has to say. Victoria looked at her watch. Time was running out, and she was facing a decision that could make or break her company. She could stick with her team of experts and hope they eventually found a solution, or she could take a massive risk and let a 17-year-old maintenance worker's son make modifications to their most important piece of equipment. What exactly would you need to do? She asked Alex. Alex walked over to a tool cabinet and pulled out a few basic tools, wrenches, measuring devices, and some adjustment equipment. First, I need to add some dampening material to these mounting brackets to reduce the vibrations. Then I need to slightly adjust the position of this fuel line to improve the flow characteristics. The whole process should take maybe 30 minutes. The room was absolutely silent as everyone processed what Alex had just said. 30 minutes to fix a problem that had stumped their team for 3 weeks. Dr. Wright shook his head in disbelief. This is insane. We can't let an untrained teenager make modifications to a multi-million-dollar engine. But Victoria was studying Alex's face, looking for any sign of doubt or uncertainty. What she saw instead was quiet confidence and genuine understanding of what needed to be done. She had built her company by taking calculated risks, and something told her that this might be the most important risk she had ever taken. Do it, she said quietly. Alex nodded and approached the engine with his tools. The room held its collective breath as he began working. His movements were precise and confident, each adjustment made with the kind of understanding that comes from genuine mechanical intuition rather than just book learning. As he worked, Alex explained what he was doing to the gathered crowd. I'm adding this rubber dampening material to absorb the vibrations from the mounting bracket. And I'm adjusting the angle of this fuel line by exactly 3 degrees to improve the flow characteristics. The engineers watched in fascination as Alex made his modifications. Despite their skepticism, they couldn't help but be impressed by his methodical approach and clear understanding of what he was doing. When Alex finished his work, he stepped back and looked at Victoria. It's ready for testing. The control room had never been so quiet. Victoria stood with her arms crossed, staring at the massive rocket engine that had caused her company so much trouble over the past month. Alex had finished his modifications and was now standing back, wiping his hands on a shop rag like he had just finished working on a car instead of a multi-million-dollar piece of aerospace technology. Dr. Patricia Holmes approached the control panel with obvious reluctance. As the head engineer, she would be the one to run the test that would either prove a teenager right or potentially damage their most expensive equipment. Her hands shook slightly as she began the startup sequence. Are you absolutely sure about this? She asked Alex one more time. Once we fire this engine, there's no going back. If something goes wrong, we could be looking at months of repairs and millions of dollars in damage. Alex nodded confidently. I'm sure, Dr. Holmes. The problems I fixed were small, but they were creating big effects. Once those issues are eliminated, the engine should run exactly like your computer models predicted. Roberto watched his son with a mixture of pride and terror. He had seen Alex fix countless machines over the years, from lawn mowers to car engines to complex industrial equipment. But this was different. This wasn't just about whether something would work or not. This was about his son's reputation, his future, and possibly the survival of Phoenix Aerospace. Victoria took a deep breath and moved to the observation window. Run the test, she commanded. Dr. Holmes initiated the startup sequence. The facility filled with the familiar whir of pumps and computers coming online. Fuel began flowing through the system, and the massive engine started its preparation cycle. Everyone in the room held their breath as the countdown began. 10 seconds to ignition, Dr. Holmes announced, her voice tense with anticipation. Alex stood perfectly still, his eyes focused on the engine. He had studied this machine for months, and he knew exactly what to look for. If his fixes had worked, the engine would start smoothly and maintain stable pressure throughout the test. If he was wrong, well, he tried not to think about what would happen then. 5 seconds, Dr. Holmes called out. The engine roared to life with a sound like controlled thunder. The entire facility shook with the power of the massive machine. Flames shot out of the exhaust nozzle with incredible force. But this time, something was different. Instead of the rough, uneven sound they had heard in previous tests, the engine was running smooth and steady. Victoria's eyes were glued to the computer monitors that displayed the engine's performance data. The pressure readings that had been jumping around wildly for weeks were now holding steady in the perfect range. The fuel flow was smooth and consistent. Every single measurement was exactly where it should be. "This is impossible," Dr. James Wright whispered, staring at his own computer screen in disbelief. "All the readings are perfect. How did he know what to do?" The test continued for a full 2 minutes, which was longer than any successful test they had run in the past month. Throughout the entire duration, the engine performed flawlessly. The pressure remained stable, the fuel consumption was exactly what the computer models predicted, and the power output was consistent and strong. When Dr. Holmes finally shut down the engine, the silence that followed was profound. Everyone in the room was staring at the computer screens, trying to process what they had just witnessed. A problem that had stumped some of the best engineers in the aerospace industry had been solved by a 17-year-old high school student in 30 minutes. Victoria was the first to break the silence. "How?" she asked, turning to face Alex. "How did you see what we missed?" Alex looked around at all the faces staring at him expectantly. These were accomplished professionals, people with decades of experience and advanced degrees from prestigious universities. But right now, they were all looking to him for answers. "It's not that you missed anything," Alex said carefully. "Your engineering work was perfect. The problem was that the real world is messier than computer models can account for." He walked over to one of the computer terminals and pointed to the screen. "Your simulations assumed that every component would behave exactly as designed. But in reality, metal expands and contracts with temperature changes. Bolts can settle slightly over time. Vibrations can cause tiny movements that add up to big problems." Dr. Holmes nodded slowly, beginning to understand. "So the engine was built perfectly according to our specifications, but the specifications couldn't account for every real-world variable." "Exactly," Alex replied. "I've been watching this engine for months, not through computer screens, but with my own eyes. I could see the vibrations in the mounting brackets during tests. I could hear the irregular sounds in the fuel delivery system. The engine was trying to tell you what was wrong, but it was speaking a language that computers can't understand." Roberto stepped forward, his chest swelling with pride for his son. "Alex has always been able to listen to machines," he said. "Even when he was little, he could tell when something was wrong with our car, just by the sound it made." Victoria found herself genuinely amazed by what had just happened. She had built her career on recognizing talent and potential, but she had almost missed one of the most gifted individuals she had ever encountered, simply because he didn't fit the traditional profile of an aerospace engineer. "Where did you learn to understand engines like this?" she asked Alex. Alex shrugged modestly. "I've been learning online for years. I watch engineering lectures on YouTube, read technical manuals, and study how different systems work together. But mostly, I just pay attention to what machines are trying to tell me." Dr. Wright was still shaking his head in amazement. I have 25 years of experience in rocket propulsion, and I completely missed what you saw in minutes. How is that possible? It's not about intelligence or experience, Alex explained. It's about perspective. You were looking at the problem through the lens of computer models and theoretical calculations. I was looking at it as a mechanical system that needed to work in the real world. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Think of it like this. You can study music theory for years and understand every rule and principle perfectly. But sometimes, the best solution comes from someone who just knows how to listen to the rhythm and feel what's missing. Victoria realized that this moment represented something much bigger than just fixing an engine. Alex had demonstrated a type of problem-solving that her company desperately needed, the ability to bridge the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application. "Alex," she said, "what are your plans after high school?" Alex glanced at his father before answering. "I was hoping to study engineering in college, but honestly, we're not sure how we're going to afford it. I've been accepted to the state university, but the tuition is still pretty expensive for our family." Victoria looked at Roberto, seeing the quiet dignity of a man who had worked hard his entire life to provide for his family. She thought about all the opportunities that were available to people with money and connections, and how much talent was probably being wasted because it came from the wrong zip code or the wrong family background. "What if I told you that Phoenix Aerospace would pay for your education?" Victoria asked. "Full scholarship to any engineering program you want to attend, plus a guaranteed position on our advanced development team when you graduate." Alex's eyes went wide with surprise. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious," Victoria replied. "What you did here today wasn't just impressive, it was revolutionary. You solved a problem in minutes that our team couldn't solve in weeks. That kind of insight and intuition is exactly what this industry needs." Roberto felt tears forming in his eyes as he watched his son's dreams suddenly become reality. He had worked double shifts and saved every penny he could, hoping to give Alex a chance at a better future. Now that future was being handed to his son by the CEO of one of the most successful aerospace companies in the world. But Alex surprised everyone with his response. "Thank you, Ms. Blackwood. That's an incredible offer, and I'm honored that you would consider me. But before I accept, I have a request." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "What kind of request?" "I want to help you create a program to find other people like me, talented individuals who might not have traditional backgrounds, but who have the potential to contribute to this industry. There are probably dozens of people out there who could help solve problems like this one, but they'll never get the chance because they don't fit the typical profile." Victoria stared at Alex in amazement. Here was a teenager who had just been offered a full scholarship and a guaranteed job, and his first thought was about helping other people get similar opportunities. This wasn't just about individual talent. This was about character and vision. "You know what, Alex?" Victoria said with a smile. "I think we're going to get along just fine." 3 months later, Victoria Blackwood stood in the same facility where everything had changed. But now, instead of the tense atmosphere of crisis that had filled the room that day, there was an energy of excitement and possibility. The rocket engine that had once been their biggest problem was now running perfectly, having completed dozens of successful tests and preparing for the Mars mission. Launch in just 2 weeks. Alex was no longer the quiet teenager sitting in the corner doing homework. He now had his own workstation in the engineering department, where he spent his afternoons after school working alongside the same engineers who had once dismissed him. His official title was Junior Engineering Consultant, but everyone in the company knew he was much more than that. The story of how a maintenance worker's son had solved Phoenix Aerospace's biggest crisis had spread throughout the industry like wildfire. At first, Victoria had been worried about the publicity. She thought it might make the company look incompetent, that their expert team had been outdone by a high school student. But the reaction had been completely different from what she expected. Instead of criticism, Phoenix Aerospace received praise for recognizing talent wherever it came from. Other companies started reaching out, asking how they could implement similar programs to find overlooked talent in their own organizations. Engineering schools wanted to study Alex's case to understand how practical intuition could complement traditional education. Dr. Patricia Holmes walked over to where Victoria was standing, holding a tablet with the latest test results. "The engine is performing even better than our original projections," she said with a smile. "Alex's modifications didn't just fix the problems we were having. They actually improved the overall efficiency by about 12%. Victoria nodded, but her mind was on bigger things than just one engine. "Patricia, I've been thinking about what Alex said that day about finding other people like him. What if we're missing incredible talent simply because we're looking in the wrong places?" Over the past 3 months, Victoria had been working with Alex to develop what they called the Phoenix Talent Initiative. The program was designed to identify individuals with exceptional mechanical intuition and problem-solving abilities, regardless of their educational background or work experience. They had started small, visiting local high schools and community colleges, looking for students who showed unusual ability with mechanical systems. They partnered with trade schools and technical programs, searching for people who understood machines in ways that couldn't be taught from textbooks. The results had been remarkable. They found a former auto mechanic who had brilliant insights into materials engineering. A woman who repaired arcade games had developed innovative solutions for electronic systems. A retired Navy technician had ideas about propulsion systems that were years ahead of current thinking. Roberto had been promoted to facility supervisor, a position that came with better pay and benefits, but more importantly, gave him the respect he had always deserved. He still worked with his hands, but now he also had input into how the facility operated and how maintenance issues were handled. "Dad, I never could have imagined this would happen," Alex said, joining his father during a break from his engineering work. 3 months ago, I was just a kid doing homework in the corner. Now I'm working on rocket engines and helping design programs to find other talented people." Roberto put his arm around his son's shoulder. "Mio, you were always special. The only thing that changed is that someone finally gave you the chance to show what you could do." But the real transformation was happening throughout the entire industry. Word of Phoenix Aerospace's success with unconventional talent had reached the highest levels of NASA, SpaceX, and other major aerospace companies. They were all beginning to rethink how they recruited and developed talent. Dr. James Wright, who had been the most skeptical of Alex's abilities, had become one of his strongest supporters. "I learned something important that day," he told Victoria. During a team meeting, experience and education are valuable, but they can also create blind spots. Sometimes the best solutions come from people who approach problems without preconceived notions about what should or shouldn't work. The Phoenix Talent Initiative had grown beyond anything Victoria had originally imagined. They now had partnerships with technical schools across 3 states, internship programs for promising students, and mentorship opportunities that paired experienced engineers with individuals who had unconventional backgrounds. Alex had become the public face of the program, speaking at engineering conferences and university events about the importance of recognizing different types of intelligence and problem-solving abilities. Despite his sudden fame, he remained humble and focused on helping others get the same opportunities he had received. "The goal isn't to replace traditional engineering education," Alex would tell audiences. "It's to complement it. Some people learn best from textbooks and lectures. Others learn best by working with their hands and observing how systems behave. In the real world, the best results come when you combine both approaches." Victoria watched from the back of the auditorium as Alex gave another presentation. this time to a group of high school students who were participating in the Phoenix Talent Initiative's summer program. These were kids from all backgrounds, some from wealthy families who could afford the best education, others from working-class families like Alex's. What they all had in common was an unusual ability to understand mechanical systems and solve complex problems. Some of them would go on to traditional engineering programs. Others would take different paths but still contribute to advancing technology and innovation. The Mars mission launch was now just 1 week away, and the rocket engine that had once threatened to destroy Phoenix Aerospace was ready to make history. But Victoria knew that the engine itself wasn't the most important thing that had come out of this experience. "Alex," she called out after his presentation was finished, "walk with me for a minute." They strolled through the facility, past the rocket engine that had started everything, past the workstations where engineers and technicians collaborated on new projects, past the corner where Alex used to sit doing homework while his father worked. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't been so frustrated that day?" Victoria asked. "What if I had never issued that challenge?" Alex considered the question seriously. Someone else would have eventually figured out what was wrong with the engine. Maybe it would have taken longer, but good engineers always find solutions eventually. "That's not what I mean," Victoria said. "I'm talking about the bigger picture. The Phoenix Talent Initiative, the change is happening. Throughout the industry, all the people who are getting opportunities they never would have had before." Alex smiled. "I think change was already coming, Ms. Blackwood. Technology's advancing so fast that we need all kinds of different perspectives to keep up. What happened that day just accelerated something that was already starting to happen." Victoria realized that Alex was probably right. The aerospace industry was facing challenges that couldn't be solved by traditional approaches alone. Climate change, resource limitations, and the need for more efficient and sustainable technologies required innovative thinking from diverse backgrounds. "You know what the most remarkable thing about all this is?" Victoria said as they reached the observation window overlooking the rocket engine. "It's not that you solved an impossible problem. It's that you've helped us realize how many other impossible problems are probably solvable if we just look at them from different angles." The launch was scheduled for the following Tuesday morning. Media crews were already setting up outside the facility, and representatives from NASA and other space agencies would be watching to see if Phoenix Aerospace's revolutionary engine design would work as promised. But for Victoria, the launch had already been successful. The real victory wasn't sending a rocket to Mars. It was proving that talent and innovation could come from anywhere, and that the most important discoveries often happened when you were brave enough to listen to unexpected voices. Alex looked out at the engine one more time, remembering the day when it had seemed like an impossible puzzle that was destroying his father's company. Now it represented something entirely different, proof that with the right perspective and the courage to try, even the most complex problems could be solved. "Thank you, Ms. Blackwood," he said quietly. "Not just for the scholarship or the job, but for taking a chance on someone like me." Victoria smiled and shook her head. "Alex, I think you've got it backwards. Thank you for taking a chance on someone like me. You could have stayed quiet that day, but instead you spoke up and changed everything." As they watched the sun set through the facility windows, both of them knew that this was just the beginning. The Phoenix Talent Initiative would continue to grow, bringing together people from all backgrounds who shared a passion for solving problems and pushing the boundaries of what was possible. And somewhere out there, in classrooms and workshops and garages around the world, other young people were developing the skills and insights that would shape the future, waiting for their own moment to step forward and show what they could do.